of the fiscal year 2022 Funding Act for the Department of Homeland Security. I am joined by the gentleman from Tennessee and my friend Chuck Fleischman, the ranking member of the subcommittee. I also welcome Committee Chair DeLauro and Committee Ranking Member Granger and all the members of the subcommittee. For today's markup, we have set up the hearing room to maintain the recommended 6-foot social distancing between members, staff, and the press corps. We will follow our traditional speaking order, beginning with the chair and ranking member of the subcommittee, followed by the chair and ranking member of the full committee, and then any other members who wish to speak. An email address has been provided to subcommittee member staff through which one can submit relevant documents such as amendments, motions, or unanimous consent requests. However, any motions or unanimous consent requests must still be made verbally during the markup. I'd like to begin by opening remarks by thanking Ranking Member Fleischman for his input and collaboration in putting together the bill before us this morning. As with prior year bills, we do not agree on every funding level or policy priority in the bill, particularly when it comes to immigration. But outside of that challenging and controversial area, I believe we are in agreement much more often than not. Nearly a year ago, in my opening statement for the fiscal year 2021 bill, I acknowledged the efforts and the dedication of the department's frontline personnel during the coronavirus pandemic. Since January 2020, the department has seen 52 line-of-duty deaths, 44 of which were reported as related to COVID-19. On behalf of the subcommittee, I convey our most sincere condolences to the families and colleagues of the members of the DHS family who have lost their lives over the last year. More broadly, I want all 240,000 DHS personnel to know that the subcommittee appreciates what you do every day to help keep our nation safe, and that we will continue to do our best to provide the resources necessary to protect your health, to keep you safe, and to carry out your missions. As I did last year, I also want to recognize the pandemic's impact on migrants, particularly those held in detention facilities. Many have also contracted the virus, and some have died. Members, before you, you have the draft bill and the committee report. We have attempted to address as many of your concerns and priorities as possible, as well as those of the full committee and House members more broadly. The subcommittee mark includes $52.81 billion in discretionary appropriations within the subcommittee's funding allocation. That's an increase of $387.3 million above the budget request and $934 million above the current year level. To put into perspective the increase above the current year, it is important to note that it is approximately the amount required just to maintain current services across the department. In addition, the bill includes $18.8 billion for major disaster response and recovery activities, which is funded above the subcommittee allocation, consistent with prior years. Throughout the bill, we invest in high-priority capabilities and activities across the broad spectrum of Homeland Security missions, including $170 million for integrated migrant processing centers at the border to be administered by the Management Directorate, $655 million for land of port of entry construction and modernization, $100 million for a new non-custodial shelter grant program for families and vulnerable individuals. This new approach is in lieu of family detention, for which the bill provides no funding. $475 million for alternatives to detention and case management services, an increase of $34.9 million. An increase of $653.9 million for Coast Guard operations, initial funding for a third polar security cutter, and increased funding for the offshore patrol cutter and the waterways commerce cutter. An increase of $145.5 million for Secret Service operations, an increase of $309 $85 million for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, an increase of $133.7 million for FEMA operations and support, increased funding for firefighter grants, transportation and port security grants, the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, and Emergency Management Performance Grants. $345 million for U.S. citizenship and immigration services to help reduce backlogs of immigration, refugee, and asylum applications, and $511 million for Science and Technology Directorate Research and Development, an increase of $67 million. The bill provides funding for an average daily population in ICE custody of 28,500 single adults. Although that is slightly higher than the population currently in ICE custody, this bill is for the upcoming fiscal year, not for today. Today, the department continues to expel most single adult migrants almost immediately, without due process, including the ability to seek asylum. With the pandemic waning, any legal basis for those expulsions will soon be gone. That means that instead of being immediately expelled, more single adult migrants will spend at least some time in ICE detention while being processed, and the requirement for detention beds will increase accordingly to avoid dangerous, inhumane overcrowding at CBP short-term holding facilities. Therefore, we have included provisions in the bill intended to reduce the overdetention of migrants as they proceed through the immigration and adjudication process if they are not flight risks and pose no threat to public safety or national security. We have also included funding and directives aimed at improving planning for anticipated flows at the border. Over time, this should help reduce our reliance on detention facilities to support the department's immigration enforcement responsibilities. I'll conclude by again thanking the ranking member for his collegiality and constructive input on the bill and report. I also thank the subcommittee staff, both majority and minority, for all their efforts over the last few months. I am proud of the work that we have done on the bill and report, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I am now pleased to turn to the distinguished ranking member for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to also thank the full committee chair for being here today, but Madam Chair, I want to thank you for your tireless work and extensive cooperation with me in your position as chair on the subcommittee. That has been present since you have from the inception, and I sincerely appreciate that. It's always a pleasure to work with you. It's a pleasure to see you today again in person, along with the rest of our great subcommittee members after such a long time away as we worked remotely and navigated through the pandemic for over a year, though at times it certainly felt longer than that. I know we have some new members and said goodbye to others, but I look forward to continuing working with you and this subcommittee to craft a bill we can all agree on to fund the vital programs and people at the Department of Homeland Security. Again, I would also like to commend you, Chair DeLauro and Ranking Member Granger, and all the staff on both sides of the aisle for overcoming what seems like impossible deadlines, producing a bill in what has to be record time, a mere 3.5 weeks after the President released the budget request. So thank all of you for the work that has enabled us to be here today. I appreciate the efforts by the chairwoman to accommodate so many requests from our colleagues in producing such a comprehensive bill in such a short amount of time. And my sincere thanks again to the staff and the personal offices of the members for their hard work this year on the hearings, virtual meetings, and diligence in tracking the issues in this bill. We very much appreciate everyone's work. Though it was unfortunate that this year's hearing process took place before we had a budget, we were able to hear from many of the department's components about their current operations and priorities. For much of the bill's funding, we're in complete agreement. Cybersecurity, TSA, Secret Service, Coast Guard, and Science and Technology, just to name a few. The proposed investments are worthy of our support. However, in order to get truly to the finish line, we must come to a reasonable agreement on the immigration issues, and until that is done, I respectfully cannot support the bill in its current form. The proud and dedicated employees of the Department of Homeland Security who work so diligently defending and protecting our nation truly deserve more than a repeat of partisan bickering over basic border security and the ability to enforce the law. Last year, the bill before us completely disregards the conference agreement enacted for the previous fiscal year by rescinding all prior year border wall funds. We are perpetually taking one step forward and 2 steps back. Further, having to negotiate the simple enforcement of our existing immigration laws at the border and within cities and communities all across this nation is certainly the cause of the surge of illegal migration all along our southern border. Additionally, we can't continue to embolden the cartels and transnational criminal organizations by limiting immigration enforcement. These criminal networks will continue to take advantage of these misguided policies by perpetuating the myth that the border is open, and will continue trafficking more and more drugs and people into the United States, increasing the profits for the cartels. Let's let our border agents and immigration officers do their jobs, and instead of restricting them, let's help them enforce the laws on the books by giving them the resources they need, investments in technology and equipment, and a clear message that we support their law enforcement mission. We can't just give them arbitrary reporting requirements, prohibition on funds, and hurdles and roadblocks to enforcement. But I'm an optimist, and I'm committed to working with the chairwoman, as we have done so in the past, to reach an agreement with the Senate on a bill we can support. As I mentioned earlier, there are many parts of the bill I'm happy to support, including the increased and robust funding for CISA to help defend and protect our critical federal cyber networks, increased funding for the military branch of this department, the United States Coast Guard, so they can better defend our maritime security interests, especially in the expanding Arctic, and increased funding for FEMA, which worked heroically all throughout the last year in response to the COVID pandemic in our communities. I don't have any amendments at this time, but I look forward to continued discussions as we prepare for the full committee in less than 2 weeks. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back.
And it is now my pleasure to recognize Ms. DeLauro, the chair of the full committee, for her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Chairman Roybal-Allard, and thank you, Ranking Member Fleischman, for all of your work on this bill. Thanks to the staff as well, because it is all of your passion, your dedication, and your hard work and teamwork that make this effort possible. This subcommittee has the important duty of funding the Department of Homeland Security, which has a diverse set of missions that together help keep the United States safe and resilient. The bill before us confronts the threats that we face while upholding our values. For starters, the bill protects America's cyber infrastructure with historic funding for cybersecurity. The Colonial Pipeline hack demonstrated just how dangerous cyber attacks and intrusions are to our national and economic security, and how important it is that we continue to invest in protecting our networks. The bill responds to $2.4 billion for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, a $397 million increase over last year. The bill also provides funding for universities to continue to research voting technologies and election procedures, which is more critical than ever. Similarly, the Coast Guard has, in this year alone, shown how essential it is in responding to everything from Russian aggression in the Arctic to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is clear that we must invest in a strong Coast Guard, and I am proud that this bill ensures it is prepared for any future challenges. With $13.1 billion in discretionary and mandatory appropriations, an increase of $327 million above last year's level. The bill responsibly secures the border and facilitates commerce and tourism, which is essential to our national security and economic prosperity. I've long been concerned about the conditions that migrants encounter at our southern border, particularly children and families who are fleeing deplorable conditions in their home countries. And it is our obligation to keep them safe and secure. The bill protects our most vulnerable immigrants, especially children and their families, by respecting their physical and mental well-being through $20 million for CBP for migrant processing improvements and $3 million for migrant child caregivers. The bill also includes increases for alternatives to detention and clearing out backlogs in refugee and asylum processing and investing in improvements to our existing ports of entry and the construction of new ones. I want to just say I know how strongly the chair and the ranking member, but I've worked with the chair on this issue of children and our border and our southern border. And we also, I thank you for mentioning, Madam Chair, that the risks of COVID to our children and migrants at the border and resulting in the death of some. Finally, I am grateful to this bill for its inclusion of language related to the removal of debris from an owner-occupied private residence or property for a major disaster. In 2018, several towns in my district were devastated by an F1 tornado. And when I spoke on this provision in July last year, homeowners still had upwards of $70,000 in costs for debris and tree removal. A month later, these same towns were struck by another F1 tornado, and some of these homeowners had just finished repairs and removal from the 2018 storm, only to be inflicted with the same damage and costs again. FEMA can and should step up, help these homeowners cover these costs, and I am proud to support this bill, which protects our nation and upholds our values. And once again, I would like to say thank you to Chairwoman Roybal-Allard and to Ranking Member Fleischman and their staffs for their work, and I urge my colleagues to support this important bill. Yield back.
Okay, thank you. Do any other members wish to be recognized for opening remarks? Are there any amendments? I now recognize the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee, Mr. Cuellar, for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. I ask unanimous consent that staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the measure just approved. Oh. Dutch, can you talk into the microphone?
I want to thank you for the extra money in cybersecurity. I know for years that's been one of the most serious issues we've been dealing with, and now we're seeing it, especially with the issues that have occurred in the United States. And what we're really concerned about, these are taking money, are destructive attacks, which could really be serious. So we've come a long way, and thank you for putting that in the bill.
Okay. Again, I'll ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the measure just approved. Without objection, so ordered. Please leave all copies of your bill and report at the desk, and the subcommittee is now adjourned.